There's too many goddamn husbands.
This is way too much. We need like a timeline here.
I know.
Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. I'm Callie.
I'm Bean.
I'm Brittany.
So today we are starting off our new year with our December book of the month, which for our book club, we have renamed it. We're very excited about it. We have dubbed it the Serpent and Badger Book Club. Yay. So we're very excited. Everything will change name-wise, but it is essentially the exact same thing. It is literally the exact same thing. So every month we have picked a book. We have picked books up until May, I believe, for this year. They are almost always backlisted titles, which now includes 2019 novels. So for the month of December, we read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is our first adult book that we chose, and I think we chose pretty well. Yeah. So far, we have high stars across the board. I know for myself, I gave this book 5 stars.
I also gave it a 5-star.
And I gave it a 4-star.
So, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo follows a 1950s starlet, and basically we're following Evelyn through her life through kind of like an expose article type of writing style. So, and each part of her life is separated by each husband, which, as the title indicates, she had a couple. Just a few. And so we follow her as she chooses this random, kind of not super famous writer to do this expose on her, as we are in the year, I believe it's 2017. So she is in her 80s, and all of her husbands are dead.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
All of her husbands are dead. No one knows why she got married so many times, but she is giving the tell-all to this one reporter named Monique, and we learn the story of Evelyn's life, why she had so many husbands, why she chose Monique to write her expose, and just everything we could ever wanted to know about this 50s starlet. At least for me, what I really loved about this book is I thought the prose was beautifully written. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing style. I read her other book that came out in 2019, which was Daisy Jones and the Six. So I really liked that, and I thought this book was perfectly paced out. A lot of books I read have a lot of pacing issues. This one had none for me.
I know that was one of my biggest issues last year in general, was when I was reading, and the pacing would be weird, but I loved the story, and I'd be done and be like, well, pacing sucked, so here we are. But this one was perfect. It felt very organic with the ways we were going through her life. It didn't feel like we were jumping back and forth, and we could definitely figure out when it was she was talking to Monique versus her actually telling her story of her life. And I felt really happy about that, because it just felt very simple. It was just, I sat down and I read, and I was in this life, and I felt like I was actually reading a biography already.
For me, I listened to the audiobook, so it was really kind of cool to get the different voices because there's a different voice when she was talking about her past versus when she's talking to Monique, which made it really cool to be able to identify when everything is taking place. So that was really quite cool. I think for me, the only reason I really didn't give it 5 stars is because it's not my genre. I couldn't care less about the lives of stars. It's not something that for me really has ever been interesting. I did find the reality of it to be very captivating and very interesting. However, it just isn't something that for me personally was that interesting. Nothing against the writing of the book. I won't read it again, in all honesty. That's just kind of how it was for me.
See, I love reading about actors and actresses because I'm weird.
No, and that's the thing, is that the majority of people do love reading about that, and Taylor Jenkins Reid is wonderful at writing about these fictional stars, and it's great. It's just not my cup of tea.
Just fair. It's not everybody's cup of tea. So now, because this book is broken down by husband, we are going to technically go into spoilers and then go husband by husband. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. If you love, like, glancing at tabloids and love, like, seeing, like, what actually goes on in actors' lives, I would highly recommend this book. It is such a cool story and such an immersive story. After reading it, certain parts, I'm like, I need to watch this movie. Oh, wait, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's how I felt, too. I was just like, oh, this is wonderful. I need to keep reading.
Yeah. So we highly recommend this book. Obviously, we all very much enjoyed it. So we're going to head into spoilers now. husband number 1, who is Ernie Diaz, who kicks off our entire plot, really, in general. So, poor Ernie Diaz helps Evelyn to get from where she's at in an abusive household with her father to LA to start her career. And it's glorious.
She sets it up as you kind of set up her whole characters. You see where she got her manipulative start. Because this entire story, she admits to Monique she's not a good person. And she reminds her throughout the entire story, she always has to remind Monique, I am not a good person. And we get that right away, which I really enjoyed. I'm really happy that it just did not paint her as a good person and then, boom, surprise, she's a bad person. It was, I'm terrible. Yeah. Here's my story.
When there were sad bits to her story, she's like, don't make this big. This is just a thing that happened. I'm still an awful human being. Make that clear. I don't want you writing this like a sob story. I want you writing this as I tell you, because I suck. Is how Evelyn is. And she's very abrasive and very adamant about that fact. And I loved that about her character. I teetered back and forth between really, really liking Evelyn Hugo and really, really hating her. And I think that was the whole point, is you're supposed to have that tug-of-war kind of feelings about this character.
Overall, I felt very inspired by Evelyn Hugo. And then at the end, I'm like, wow, you're not good.
No.
And that's one of those things where I'm just like, she tells you this, but you realize it at the same time as Monique. Because Monique goes through this entire story like, no, this is a great person. Why is she telling me she's terrible? And at the end, it's
why.
That,
hits you like a nice brick wall. It's great.
But with Ernie Diaz, you can tell that she's manipulative because right off the bat, she lies about her age.
Yes.
She bumps her age up by 2 years so she can get married to this guy
who is moving to LA.
So she can start her career.
Yep. So Ernie doesn't have a big play in this. He's just sort of Evelyn's stepping stone, to be completely honest. And that's exactly what he's used for. Our next husband, however, is a big plot point, and that is goddamn Don Adler, my least favorite husband.
Yeah.
And I think everybody hates him.
Favorite husband.
So Don Adler is kind of this big name star at the time. He comes from a star-studded family. He's the golden boy, and he is just the perfect actor. And Evelyn falls in love with him. He is a very charming person. I kind of saw him as like Gaston. Like, on the outside, everyone's like, oh my god, he's so charming and princely and I love him. However, 4 months into their marriage, he starts hitting her. And in this time period, that is extremely acceptable.
And extremely common.
Yes. Extremely common.
She's just expected to take it.
Yep.
And that's how it is.
It is. She does. She takes it, and she just goes about her life and just keeps on trucking along, dealing with this husband. And Don is a very manipulative human being as well. Every time he hits her, he then goes back and gives her flowers and tells her how apologizes, says he'll never do it again. And it's so interesting and sad that you're seeing Evelyn go through this while actually she is getting to the height of her career as well. So it's very 50-50 between where this whole point in her life is, as her career is skyrocketing, which is one of the reasons she'd married Don Adler, is to kind of skyrocket a film they were both in together. A lot of people said they had chemistry on screen, and it's because they're in love. That'll get more people to go to the movies, and it worked. So after their marriage, both of their careers skyrocketed, and Evelyn was so there for that. She just had to put up with being beaten, and that's how she saw it. Is just, all right, well, my career's going great, but I get hit at home. It's a very weird dynamic.
Another part of this is there is kind of a silver lining with this part. This is when she meets Celia, and this is when her relationship with Harry develops as well. So she confides in these people, and they become her best friends. And more happens, and it's just one of those things where you really see the culture of old old Hollywood, where this is what happened. This was the historical fiction part of the story, was actually getting that inside look of what actually went on and what we hear about stars kind of talking about now, that they did go through this, and that's it's not just something we see in the movies or read in books.
I guess the thing that I always interesting about Don Adler is that he does come back later.
He does.
And we talked earlier about how she was a bad person, and she kind of proves that again later, where it's like she could have said something and saved one of her
friends marries Don Adler later, and one of the comments her friend makes is, why didn't you tell me? Yeah. And Evelyn immediately knew what she was talking about. It's little things like that Evelyn's like, I should have said something. I could have prevented Ruby from dealing with this.
But she also says, on the flip side of that, one of her lines in the book says that we were all friends, but I would push any one of those ladies in front of a train to get apart.
Yep.
That was one of her lines.
It was extremely cutthroat.
Yeah.
And that's Hollywood. Hollywood is extremely known for being cutthroat, and that was not any different in the 50s.
And towards the end of that relationship, when Evelyn pretty much had enough and Don had enough, it was actually because of cheating and then the abuse, and Don ends up saying that she abandoned him.
Yes.
So he got her blacklisted.
He did.
Which was atrocious and evil, and I hate the guy.
Yep, it was bad. It was a bad time. So she had been blackballed in Hollywood, but she kind of didn't care. So she stayed unmarried for a while, and she stayed unmarried for a while because she fell in love with Celia St. James, which was a beautiful love story at the beginning, and that was kind of a nice thing to throw in. And one of the things I really liked about it when we went back to Monique is Monique's first thing is, oh my god, you're actually a lesbian. Holy crap, this is huge. And Evelyn was like, no. I loved Don Adler. And she's like, oh. She's like, yeah, exactly. I don't want to be stapled as a lesbian. I am bisexual, and I am proud of it. But you have to make sure you include that aspect of it. And I really liked how Evelyn handled that. It wasn't about shaming. It wasn't about hiding who she was. It was showing who she actually was, even with the labels.
And about picking the correct label and not going with what everyone's first assumption would be.
So, due to the fact that she had to hide her relationship with Celia St. James, we move on to marriage number 3, Mr. Gullible Mick Riva. This was like a weird weekend-long marriage. There were started to circulate rumors about the two of them being a couple. And I think Mick Riva was at the late 50s, early 60s stage. So this was very bad. This could get them both killed, imprisoned, and this was just bad. So Evelyn has the idea, much to Celia's disdain, to marry a random man who said at a live concert he was holding that he would happily marry Evelyn Hugo because of her beauty. So Evelyn goes and gets him drunk in Vegas, and sure as shit, they end up married. So she makes it seem like it's all his idea, which really shows off that manipulativeness. She makes him think the marriage and the annulment is his idea.
She just goes through every single detail of... She even titles it, like, How to Get a Guy to Marry You in Vegas. And it's just... the detail that she goes into on, like, this is how you do it. This works, and this is what happens. It was intense.
It was.
And
it was the shortest, I think, chapter aspect because the marriage was so short, but it was so meticulous and descriptive about why she needed to do it. But the issue with this is Celia was not a fan.
Not at all.
She was okay with the idea of the marriage. She was not okay with the fact that Evelyn slept with this guy. Yeah. That is where the whole thing unraveled. Yes. She's just like, I thought you were just going to marry this guy. And Evelyn's like, no, part of the thing, like, I had to do this, otherwise it wasn't going to work.
If she didn't consummate the marriage, it didn't count. And that was a big thing back then, was consummating the marriage. Yes. So she even tells Celia, and she's like, it's not technically a marriage if I didn't consummate it. How could you not have thought of that? And that is when Celia leaves the first time.
And I believe there was a 5-year gap.
Yes. They
5 years.
see each other at the Oscars, I believe, 5 years later. which the Oscars are a big thing in this book, which I really love. I watch the Oscars every year. I love the Oscars. They're like my favorite event of the whole year. Having that be such a big thing and seeing that thought process of an actress who has been nominated, that thought process of during that time was really cool for me to see, especially because Evelyn, I think, was nominated 4 or 5 times for an Oscar and only got 1, and that wasn't until the 80s. So we'll get to that one, but she was nominated a few times in the 50s and 60s beforehand, and seeing that. So the Oscars where they meet up again after 5 years is when Celia wins her Oscar. So this was the second time Celia had won, and Evelyn couldn't handle not congratulating her because she still had this deep-seated love for Celia.
Clever Rex North was the next husband, and this is the one that was the most meticulous, and the one that I found the most intriguing, because this is the one that you find out what actor-actresses' marriages were actually like, in a way, that not necessarily, they don't get married for the love. They get married as a publicity stunt. And there's a couple of different books, TV shows, and movies that play around with this idea. If anyone's watched the show Nashville, they do that in that show. And it's always intriguing to me. It always makes me kind of smile a little bit because it's like, this is so manipulative to the public. And the public eats it up.
Yes.
Even though we know it's fake.
Yep.
It's crazy. So that's one thing that I really enjoyed. So they were making a movie together, and it was both of them put money into it too. So they were producing and acting in this movie, and they wanted to make it seem like they had this natural chemistry. And it was kind of, they did, but they didn't. So they got married, and then everyone and their mother wanted to see the movie, and this is one that they were actually nominated for Oscars as well.
Yes.
And they struck a deal where it was all in the contract. Evelyn said, "You will not sleep with me."
Nope.
At all.
Nope.
They came close.
Came close once.
Once.
In their, 7-year marriage.
Yes. And she's like, "You are free to keep living your life as a bachelor.
Yep.
Just don't get caught."
Yep.
That was pretty much, they were allowed to live their lives with whoever they wanted. Just don't get caught. He goes and screws it up and gets, a girl pregnant
and falls in love with her.
And that's when everything unravels.
But it unravels at a good time
It
because
does.
at the end of their marriage is when Evelyn and Celia are starting to kind of rekindle their relationship. They're writing letters to each other. They're kind of both realizing that, oh, I messed up. No, I messed up. I still love you. It was kind of that back and forth.
It was beautiful.
It was very pretty. And thus this divorce helped both of them out in the end, which leads us into, I think, almost all of our favorite husbands, which is Harry Cameron. So Harry Cameron's been with us since the very beginning. He is a producer who has helped Evelyn throughout her entire career, and he is a closeted gay man, which, again, at the time, totally normal. Super big thing. A lot of closeted people. And they actually figure out a deal with Celia and her husband, who is Harry's lover. So they have this marriage, fake marriage.
Love square thing.
Yeah, like a weird thing where they have struck up a deal that in front they are married to their prospective partners, but in real life, Evelyn is with Celia and Harry is with John.
Who's an all-star, all-American football player.
Yeah, which
Plays
I thought...
for the New York Giants.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Best believe the sports fan remembers that.
True.
So this was her longest marriage, and this was her longest marriage because their arrangement worked out so well. Even then, after I think 7 or 8 years into this arrangement, Evelyn wants a baby.
And so does Harry.
And so does Harry. So they make a baby. They have a baby.
And this time it was a conversation that Evelyn and Celia had over a couple of weeks. It wasn't something that Evelyn was like, "I'm doing this." It was, "I want you to be a part of this. And for you to be a part of this, we have to have the conversation."
Even with John, too.
Yeah.
They had a conversation, all 4 of them, I want a baby. I want to have it naturally. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I thought that was a beautiful moment because that was, it showed their growth as people. Because we're aging with Evelyn as she's getting older and older. So I think it showed a lot of her maturity and her growth in that aspect. However, we run into some issues. And that is Don Adler. So Evelyn gets chosen to do a movie with Don Adler again, and she agrees with pushing from Celia. It was Celia's idea for her to do this movie. Celia didn't know it was Don Adler.
Celia didn't know that Don Adler was in it.
But she had already agreed to the movie.
Yeah.
So Celia kind of pressures her to do this movie. Her career was kind of just coasting. It wasn't going anywhere. She hadn't been nominated in a while. So she wanted to kind of, and Celia, being that partner, noticed that in Evelyn, this was also hurting her. So she was trying to figure out a way to help her career, and that was this movie with Don Adler. So this movie is a very out there film, and Evelyn says it is probably one of the best performances she has ever given, and it is extremely explicit. So, and because of that explicitity, Celia leaves. She leaves Evelyn and John at the same time. And it's a huge, like, fight. And it's a huge thing because this is where that kind of de-evolution happens, where Evelyn didn't tell her she was doing this huge explicit scene with Don Adler. And when she tells her, she's like, well, I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't want you to do it. Well, I already did. Yeah. And that's where this huge fight happens, and they break up for the second time. So after John dies, that's when Evelyn sees Celia again, since the big breakup. And that's also right about when she divorces Harry. And Harry kind of tells her, like, my love's dead, but you could still find someone. So they decide to get a divorce. And she immediately marries disappointing Max Girard, who is a director and has directed a couple of her big bombshell movies. He directed the movie that got her out of being blacklisted, and I believe he also directed the movie with Don Adler.
Yes.
So they were writing letters to each other. She thought that she could find love again with this man, and
he was saying all the right things, like, we've known each other since the 60s, we've known each other for 20 years, like, I want to be with you, and then it just kind of started devolving into something where it was more, he liked the idea of being with the Evelyn Hugo. He wasn't in it because he loved her.
He loved the idea and the image that created for him.
He's all about the image of it and what her name can do for him. And what their names together mean, rather than who she actually is as a person.
And this marriage gets really, really messy because the letters to Celia start again, and Max threatens her. This is the first time we've seen that kind of threat in this book, which is kind of impressive considering we're on husband number 6.
Yeah.
But this is when he figures out that she's been in love with Celia, and he threatens, like, if you divorce me, I'm going public with this, and you'll be ruined. He did not want to lose this image that he had created with Evelyn Hugo. So Evelyn does what Evelyn does best. She manipulates the publicity with it to make Max seem like just a crazy man who's bitter because she left him. And it works.
It does.
It works perfectly.
It shouldn't, but it works so well.
It did, because I was actually kind of scared.
I didn't think it would work. I really didn't think it would.
Because this is about the early 80s, so we're starting to see the AIDS epidemic. We're starting to see more of the gay rights movement being more loud and proud and actually being more acceptable. But we're also seeing the pushback of it still. People still aren't accepted. So it's still playing that little line of, is this going to be okay or is this going to be a huge fiasco? So Evelyn does what Evelyn does best, and we actually haven't really seen that manipulation in a while. Because of that marriage to Harry, there was no need for it. So we see that manipulation again, and she wasn't rusty at it.
She's very good at it.
Very, very good at it. So in between husband 6 and 7, Harry dies. And Harry dies drunk driving.
He is the driver.
He is the driver. So basically what had happened after she left Max, her and Celia are back together. And Harry has also found someone new. So Harry had suggested to Evelyn that they go back to the plan that they had before, to just do the whole little marriage flip-flop thing and do it that way. And they were going to agree, it seemed like, but Harry kills himself and his new lover, And what Evelyn does is she takes Harry out of the vehicle to a hospital and puts the lover in the driver's seat to make it look like he was the drunk driver. Mm-hmm. It is a horrible move. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of where the horribleness of Evelyn comes into play. Because at one point you understand what she's doing.
And when they're telling that story of what she's doing,
yes,
you're just like, okay.
Like, it makes sense.
It makes sense. I don't like it,
yeah.
But it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It for her. I'm not surprised that she did that.
No, I'm not at all surprised at what she did. So she takes Harry to the hospital. She's able to get a goodbye and a goodbye for Connor, and Harry dies. Mm-hmm. So this is extremely hard because Harry is Evelyn's oldest ally and oldest friend. So it's extremely hard on Evelyn and Connor. Connor is a teenager at this point. Connor's their daughter.
By the way,
if we haven't mentioned. She's a teenager. And it's hard. Yeah. It is a hard transition. But what's kind of nice is she has Celia at this point. For the third time. And they come up with a plan. Because at this point, Celia reveals that she's sick. Mm-hmm. So Celia has a disease that is slowly going to kill her. And she will not see the age of 60. So what they all decide to do is Evelyn will marry Celia's brother, the agreeable Robert Jamison, and they will move to Spain and sort of live out their lives until Celia is gone. Mm-hmm. By marrying Celia's brother, Evelyn can get all of Celia's holdings and actually kind of be able to, it sounds bad, but benefit from her death. Yeah. Which is what Celia wanted. She wanted Evelyn to be able to benefit from her death.
And it's very similar to the agreement that her and Rex North had, where Robert could still go do what he wanted as long as he didn't get caught.
Yep.
And they chose Spain because it was a country where they weren't really known. Yep. They went to a coastal town, very small, and pretty much if she was recognized, it was from her early movies that she did with Max. Yep. That not many people will recognize her now because she's aged.
Yes.
And this is where we kind of see Connor evolve into an adult.
The thing with Connor that we kind of skipped over is that when Harry dies, Connor basically ends up becoming this
party girl?
Drug addict.
Yes.
Party girl who's drunk all the time. And it spirals out of control.
It does.
For her, and that's almost what prompts
them the Spain move.
The move to Spain is they want something fresh because Connor's living in the shadow of her mom and dad, literally. Yeah. And if her mom's just ended her 6th marriage, I mean, how hard is that on a 15-year-old girl knowing that your mom's been married 6 times?
Yeah.
She's a 15-year-old girl who has realized that her mom has had 6 husbands. Her dad is dead because he was an alcoholic.
Yep.
And she's now dealing with this, or trying to deal with this, while dealing with the fame, while dealing with everything else that's going on in the world.
Especially with her mom starting to have an open relationship with Celia in front of Connor. Yes, she's starting to come to terms on what this actually means.
She does have a sit-down with Connor to explain the story of Celia, which I thought was actually kind of a nice mother-daughter moment.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I did like that. So they moved to Spain to kind of help Connor to hide the relationship and kind of let Celia live out her last days in comfort.
And Robert basically becomes another dad for
He does, Connor, and it's really sweet.
Super sweet, and definitely something that she needed, so.
He does. He becomes that father figure without really being a father, and it's very nice. So we get to the end of Celia, which is a very sad moment.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. But one thing that is really cute, and that is at the end of the book, is they get married. Like, technically Evelyn's already married to Robert, but they have, like, a cute little ceremony where they just promise each other to love each other and call each other wives. And it's a really beautiful and tender moment. And then I believe it's only a couple weeks after that where Celia passes away. Which is very hard on Evelyn. She stays married to Robert till he dies. And then we're dealing with all of that. Connor gets sick. So at this point, Connor is at her late 30s. Connor gets breast cancer and dies. This is a huge blow to Evelyn. And one of the things that prompted this entire story is Evelyn is donating her most famous gowns from award shows, from red carpets, to help breast cancer, which is how Connor died. So that is kind of what sparks this whole thing. Evelyn never marries again after Robert dies. She lives in a nice little penthouse with just one nice little maid who is adorable, and I loved her. And after she ends this story, Monique asks the question that's been driving her. Why me? Monique is like this unknown writer, and that is where Evelyn drops this bombshell that in the car accident with Harry was Monique's father. Monique grew up loving her father, thinking that their parents' marriage was amazing and perfect, and that her dad was a drunk and died, and she just has lived with that her entire life.
Monique was 11 when her father died.
And idolized her father until that moment. This is the moment where the hatred comes in. Because holy crap, I didn't see that twist.
No.
So Monique rightly storms away. She has a photo shoot the next day. She comes back, and that is when Evelyn drops another bombshell that Evelyn has breast cancer. And it will be dying soon.
And in very typical Evelyn style, she needs to have control. She needs to be in control of the situation. So without saying anything, she basically tells Monique that she will be found dead.
Yep.
The next day?
Yep.
Or a couple days later, something like that. And we are left not knowing, but realizing that Evelyn has killed herself so that the disease does not kill her.
Yes.
And the way that Evelyn kind of, not tricked Monique, but the way she convinced Monique, the way she found her, was initially, Monique did a expose on
euthanasia.
Assisted suicide.
Yep.
So that was kind of what sparked Evelyn's, she was researching it to begin with, and then she kind of made that connection, and then she's like, aha.
Yep.
Another manipulative
thing to
tactic.
do.
So that was one thing. I was kind of, when I was reading that part, I was kind of picking it up as Monique was figuring it out. She's like, this is why. She's going to use what I wrote about to kill herself. This is crazy. And Monique struggles with, do I stop her? For me, it was a beautiful moment, because I'm just like, she's having this hatred, but at the same time, she's like, but this is another human. This is someone I've just spent weeks of my life with. What do I do? And then she ultimately realizes, like, this isn't my place. I thought it was a beautiful ending.
It was. It ended with a news clipping about Evelyn dying. And I think towards the end, what my favorite thing about this was Evelyn made a joke to Monique about how people have always been interested in my 7 husbands, but boy, will they be interested in my wife. And I thought that was just perfect. It was a beautiful story. Like we said, we really enjoyed it. It had everything in it. It had everything in it. Except, I believe, murder. People died. No one was murdered.
I think one of the big things about this book that is important to realize is that none of these would be classified today as healthy relationships.
No, none of them.
None of these were healthy. None of these were good for Evelyn. And when you look back on every relationship she has had in her life, all the way back to her relationship with her father before she even moved to LA, she's never had a good relationship.
Even Celia, I thought, was pretty toxic.
That was a tick. That was one of, I really didn't enjoy that relationship because it was, like you said, it was a very toxic relationship, and it was very apparent that that's what she was looking for.
Yep.
She didn't know what else to go for.
But I think that's what made it real.
Exactly.
That aspect made it so realistic in that aspect where, again, after I finished this book, I'm like, I want to watch all these Evelyn Hugo movies, but none of them exist.
Yeah.
And I was sad. So that was our December book of the month. Sorry if this was a little lengthy. We had a lot to say. We all really liked it. To quickly wrap up, our next Serpent and Badger Book Club book is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This is a fantasy book. That is YA. We are jumping back into fantasy because
we miss it.
We miss it. And we love it. we're very excited to jump into this book. This is a super high fantasy book that we are just super pumped to read. So that is all we have for you guys today. So feel free to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We post videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday.
And if you want to be reminded whenever we post these videos, hit the little bell icon down below.
And be sure to follow us on Instagram and Goodreads. Our links will be in the description.
And we will see you guys in our next video.
Bye!